Hello, my name is Neal. I am originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, though I, in this season of my life, am somewhat of a self proclaimed nomad. I am an independent freelance photographer, and this is a bit of my story. So, I was raised in the faith. Christianity has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I grew up in a predominantly white, affluent community, so the kids I went to school with, many of them look like me. We acted quite similarly. We had really comparable upbringings. And honestly, life was in essence a bit of a bubble. I existed in this really wonderful community, but it was a bubble in many ways until I went to Haiti at the age of 15 on a service trip with my church. And that is when I began to just scratch the surface of what a radical life of faith really means. So, being only 15 at the time, I don't really feel like my life changed that much other than my perspective. My family became pretty actively involved in the local organization there, and we would make trips throughout the years. We spent a handful of Christmases there in my remaining years of high school and into college, and it just kind of became part of our routine. However, with that said, I do feel like I had two very separate lives. So I had obviously my life in the States, which was a majority of the time, but then I also had this life in Haiti. And though in my mind I separated the two, they were very integrated. I when I went off to college, I just kind of got swept up in worldly temptations and really lived out this rather stereotypical earthly college experience. And at the end of my freshman year, I recall just feeling very down. I ended up going to Haiti for a week after that first year of college, and it was that summer. I never really know how to describe this feeling, but I just felt an overwhelming sensation from the Holy Spirit that Haiti would be somewhere I would live in the future. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know when that would be. I just knew it was going to be somewhere I lived. And I had never, prior to that trip, had those feelings. And so I went back to college my sophomore year feeling both convicted and conflicted because my former life was calling me to lead one lifestyle, and I had this other life awaiting for me that I felt God was calling me to, and they didn't align. And so that entire year I felt a lot of internal tension, a lot of friction until the point that I decided that I could no longer be there, and I just couldn't lead two lives. I needed to walk away from one in order to embrace the other. And so I chose to transfer. I, left behind some really wonderful friendships. I left behind this person who I thought I was supposed to be, and I ended up applying to an online school. And in many ways, I felt like a failure for doing that. I felt like, this was only 10 years ago, so online education has really evolved, especially in the last year. But at the time, I just felt like it wasn't as valid of an education as going to a physical school. But again, I felt like with where I was headed, it made sense logistically. It made sense time-wise. So I had at one point considered dropping out of college entirely, but I am grateful, I stayed the course, even despite it being a bit unconventional. So at the end of 2013, I ended up moving to Haiti. I moved there with the intent of overseeing an orphanage of 11 children, many of whom I'd already known over the years of visiting, but I didn't really know them because it's hard to get to know a person, a culture, or a country without having long-term experience there. And so I picked up the language pretty quickly, and about 6 months in, I hired a Haitian psychologist. And together, in conversation with the children, we quickly learned that most of them had at least one biological living parent. And so it became our goal to not only reconnect with those parents, but also begin a process of reunifying children with their parents if possible. And so I lived in Haiti for 4 years, and I would say about 3 years of that time was spent with that focus. And some of these kids had been separated from their families for years, and so it took a great deal of time and effort and just rebuilding trust, right, between parents and their children. I think prior to moving there, I had this misconception that parents give their children away to orphanages because they don't want them, because they're negligent, or I guess I just had this really negative connotation. But the reality is, many of those parents are just seeking better opportunities for their children. So whether it's education, or it's having one good meal a day, it's having clothes on their back, or whatever the needs are, parents are not giving their children up out of a lack of love, but because of their love for their kids. And so that was in many ways a very full circle moment for me, because thinking back to how I was raised, I could never have imagined being separated from my parents out of a lack of resources. I was never without. And just recognizing the privilege that I had growing up, it really helped paint this picture of what life ought to be like in other countries where maybe resources aren't as abundant, but that doesn't mean that families can't be together. And so God really, he opened my eyes in more ways than one throughout my time living in Haiti. And a handful of the kids were able to move back with their parents, which was rather redemptive. And I ended up moving back to the States at the end of 2017, which was not easy. I always imagined moving back would be this kind of beautiful experience, but it was really, really challenging, and it still is. I still very much grieve my life there because it's so much a part of who I am. And now I am able to travel back and forth. I get to partner with and work with local organizations, social businesses. I get to do photography while I'm there. And so it's been really quite restorative for me to be able to combine my career with what I'm truly passionate about. And I am definitely a work in progress. God is still working on me, but I do feel like he's got me in this place right now. Even though there are many, many days that I miss Haiti, I do feel like he has me where I am for a purpose. And sometimes my life feels a bit unconventional, but I have also learned that when God is nudging you somewhere, follow that nudge, because you just have no idea where it could lead. The leap of faith always overcomes the risk, the fear of risk. At least has been the case in my personal life. I think it's easy in America, we put God in a box. And it's easy to do that because when we're without need, we can kind of paint this picture of God to be whoever we want him to be, but that's not reality for much of the world. And so I just try to be aware of how God is portrayed through the American church versus who he actually is. And it's been a humbling experience. It's been a very humbling ride, and again, God's constantly working on me, and I many days feel like the worst Christian, but thank goodness for grace and for community and all those wonderful attributes that God gives us. But so I don't really know what the future holds. I'm not really a big planner. I kind of just take it one day at a time, and just am always open to embracing what God has for me. And I would encourage, if anything else, I just want to encourage others to follow where God is leading you, even if it feels like wildly unconventional or just very, very non-traditional, do it, because you just don't know where it could take you.